When it comes to climbing injuries, the upper body tends to get all the attention. Kind of makes sense because most of the injuries do happen between the fingers, elbows, and shoulders. But I'm seeing a lesser known injury, at least in the climbing community, pop up like crazy lately. In fact, me and my two best boulder buddies, all three of us have this same injury right now. And if you're not careful, you might end up with it too. It's called proximal hamstring tendinosis, and there are a few ways to acquire it. Interestingly, me, Trevor, and Caroline all picked it up in slightly different ways.
The first incident happened while I was climbing at the gym. I was on a sport route and there was a move that required a heel hook that was pretty high up, like eye level, and then you pull your body into it. And so as I was going into that move, I actually heard a tearing sound, and at the time I thought it was my pants. So I took and I was feeling around on my leg, searching for like a hole. I didn't feel anything, and that kind of made me pause and like, did I hear something like inside of me tear, like a muscle or something? But I didn't feel any pain in that moment. I didn't necessarily think that I had done something serious. And so flash forward a few days, we're at the Red River Gorge, and I get on a sport route that has a really similar style movement to that gym route that I was on. Heel hook that's like eye level, and you really got to hoist your whole body onto it and pull up into it. And sure enough, as I'm doing that move, this time I hear a really audible popping sound. I hear it, my belayer hears it, people around my belayer hear it. This time I do feel like excruciating pain. I can barely walk the rest of that weekend. It's definitely difficult to hike. There's a lot of pain, and it's really difficult to sit down.
For Trevor, the onset was similar but slightly different.
I recently injured my TFCC tendon in my hand, and there will be a future video. After that injury, being the young, dumb kid that I am, I decided that it would be a great idea to just get the strongest legs that I have ever had in my life. Kind of two separate injuries, but how it happened was I did a lot of pistol squats, 6 sets of 5 on each side, and then did a bunch of like jump squats, 3 days of intense leg workouts, David Goggins style. I decided to do some yoga stretching afterwards, some deep stretching of the hamstring, and I heard a loud audible pop. Knew pretty much instantly this was not good. One of the biggest lessons that I've learned now from both injuries is that overdoing it's gonna eventually get you injured. There's no doubt about it. I was in severe pain. I couldn't walk. I had to get crutches. I went to go get an MRI done. Luckily, I did not have a tear. I just had a severe strain and inflammation of the ischiotuberosity, otherwise known as proximal hamstring tendinosis.
Trevor and Caroline both had what they call an acute injury, which basically means it happened at a sudden and usually memorable point in time. But my experience was totally different. Although it's possible, or some might say even likely, that there was an incident that resulted in a slight strain to my hamstring, I never noticed or remember one at all. At the time, my girlfriend was still living in San Diego, and I was spending like a couple of weeks there each month. I was so psyched to have outdoor climbing accessible that I would go like 3 or 4 days a week. At face value, that probably doesn't seem dangerous, especially not for the hamstring, but of course that climbing comes with hiking. At first, I was climbing mostly at Santee, where the approach is pretty easy. Then I got really psyched on Mount Woodson, where the hikes to all of my favorite projects were uphill and like pretty brutal. I found myself hauling the pads up Woodson 3 or 4 days a week, hiking more with the girlfriend on weekends, and sitting a lot for work in between. That might not seem important, but it is. Not to mention the strain of actually climbing those 3 to 4 days per week. I started to notice a little tickle at that connection point that Trevor was talking about. And perhaps like many of you, I thought that stretching and foam rolling could help. Spoiler alert, both make it worse. As does sitting, standing, walking, sometimes laying down, pretty much all the stuff.
With the strain, it started off really bad. I was having muscle spasms and all kinds of bad things were going on. Couldn't walk, a lot of really bad symptoms. Now I'm doing a lot better, and I can attribute that to, going to see a good doctor, getting it properly diagnosed through an MRI, which I don't think is always required. If you know that it's a strain, go forward from there. Proximal hamstring tendinosis, maybe without the hamstring strain, you can denote it by dull aching pain right at where the connection point is to your pelvic bone. So it kind of feels like it's right under your butt. I've been dealing with that now for about 3.5 weeks. Every time I sit down for longer than 15, 20 minutes, it starts to get a little numb and ache a little bit. The pain only increased worse and worse as the days went on, and probably the worst pain I was feeling was on day 4 or 5. Probably day 10 was when I started to recover with no medical intervention other than just getting it diagnosed.
It was like a few weeks before I was really able to climb again without pain. I still had to avoid overhanging things for probably like 6 months, just because it really engaged that muscle in like a strenuous way. A span of like weeks and months of getting better and progressively being able to do things without pain. Years later, the only thing that really like comes around to haunt me are long seated rides in like planes or cars. That definitely aggravates it, but interestingly enough, it doesn't really show up in anything athletic like running, climbing. That's all good. I do feel a little bit of tightness on one side when I'm doing yoga, which I think is just really noticeable because you're doing symmetrical stretching movements on the left and the right. So I can definitely see a difference, and that formerly injured leg is tight for sure and takes a bit more to warm up. But other than that, it really doesn't hold me back. But like, damn, does a long car ride hurt? Right now, Trev has had a similar experience where he got severely aggravated by a metal chair. So yeah, it's that sitting down on hard surfaces that is really like absolutely tough. All these years later, that's kind of, I guess, the odd thing about this injury. And I think Justin probably has a similar experience.
Yeah, she's right. It's been a few years for me as well, but I still have some lingering weakness and tightness in my left hamstring, and it definitely flares up on me in that little sit bone connection point on a long drive or sitting down on a hard surface for a while. I did a decent job of getting it out of the pain cycle, but to my great shame, a really crap job of doing proper rehab once the frequent pain had stopped. It's partially because I think my injury was the mildest of the three. If there was a triggering event, it was like super mild because I never felt it. I never had notable pain in the muscle. I never had spasms or anything like that. So I didn't have a ton of motivation in the short term, but it's really become a long-term annoyance. Lucky for me, my guy Trevor's injury was bad enough that he tracked down a fancy Harvard doctor who not only gave him a lot of great info, but also set him up with some proper rehab. Although I'm mostly interested in the tendinosis, his initial physical therapy is focused mostly on the muscle strain.
I'm now at day 24, and since day 10, I've been doing consistent dedicated physical therapy specifically for the hamstring and of course for the TFCC recently. So I've been busy with my physical therapy. Just in 2 weeks, I've noticed a huge increase in my hamstring's ability to do my daily tasks. I'm already ready to do a hike. I'm gonna go for a hike this weekend. I'm not hiking anything crazy, but maybe like 500 feet of elevation gain or something. Test the waters, if you will, to see where it's at. They typically say that this is a 6 to 8 week recovery. I'm hoping to be on the 6 week end of that. The more long-term injury for me will be the proximal hamstring tendinosis. Of course, that's if I don't re-injure my hamstring. The proximal hamstring tendinosis is pretty annoying. If you have it or you're watching this video because you're having that kind of pain, you probably know what I'm talking about. You don't have to have a muscle strain like I did to inflame it. You can just inflame it through overuse and just overdoing it with it and then not doing your proper physical therapy. But I think the biggest lesson I've learned in both injuries is that overdoing it's never going to be good. Listen to your body. If you feel a tweak coming on or something like that, like, don't push through it. I'm almost 29 now, and I think the 30s are kind of hitting me a little early. Watch my buddy Justin's videos, you already know that he gets injured on a weekly basis.
Who's injured now?
He's always talking about injury prevention and listening to his body, and I think it's smart to do that and to not overuse and not overdo things. The second biggest lesson that I've learned is that physical therapy is the best way to treat an injury. A big indicator of how it will heal and how well it will heal is, are you staying consistent? Are you staying true to your physical therapy and everything that you need to be doing for that injury? This injury has taught me a lot. I can tell you that there are 3 hamstring muscles that connect at the ischial tuberosity to the hamstring. I'm learning my human anatomy here. So I was catastrophizing in the first 3 days. I thought I needed surgery. I thought this was gonna be terrible. And luckily the doctor said, you don't need to do that. Get to physical therapy, start doing it. Don't take it too hard. Being patient with your injury. And for me, that's really hard. I'm a go hard kind of person. I like climbing real hard. I always overdid it. I climbed 5 days a week all the time. And now for the past 24 days, I haven't even touched a rock. And that's hard for me. I'm having to learn, and really through all this research, I'm learning that physical therapy is what you need to do. Hopefully, if you have the same issue that I have, you can get through it the same way that I'm getting through it right now, and know that everything is gonna be okay. Once you're back to your status quo, well, now it's time pre-injury prevention stuff. Maybe once a week now you're doing a hamstring exercise or doing a wrist exercise, or elbows, rotator cuff, back, lower back specifically for us climbers, hamstrings for us climbers, those heel hooks get you. Us climbers, we really push the tendons, obviously, and the connective tissues, ligaments, cartilage, things like that. We're really pushing those things to the bone. If you're 21, just turn the video off. Go hard, son. Don't worry about it. It's fine. You'll never get injured. It's fine. You'll heal in a couple days. But if you're, starting to get a little older like me, hopefully I come out of this injury a stronger climber in that regard, where I'm now focused on building every single block of my body to make sure that I'm hopefully preventing injuries, and then listening to my body accordingly. Okay, what is the problem? And now what is the solution through proper physical therapy?
Trevor's got me inspired to properly rehab my proximal hamstring tendinosis. The Brits call it a tendinopathy, so if you hear somebody say that, we're probably talking about the same thing. So instead of including all the rehab exercises he's doing in this video, I'm gonna take those exercises, use them over the next few months, and put out a video on both his and my progress.
And as always,
thanks for watching.